Hey everybody, Aaron Bishop here with Derek High on behalf of the Patterns of Life Bible. I wanted to show you something really cool that I found in the book of Ezekiel. In fact, it is the center pericope in the book of Ezekiel. And this pericope, it really highlights an underlying theme of the book of Ezekiel that we often miss. Because when we go to the book of Ezekiel, we see visions of the throne room. We see Ezekiel doing some really weird stuff, playing with toys and baking bread over dung. We see visions of the Spirit leaving Jerusalem. We see a vision of the temple as it's supposed to be, a valley of dry bones, warnings to kings and to Israel. So many grand scope things going on in this book. And yet right in the center, there's something deeply personal to Ezekiel. And this very personal episode, it helps us to understand what's happening in the entire book. So let's take a look at it. So the pericope in question is Ezekiel pericope 25. The very center of pericope, there's 49 in the book of Ezekiel. And this is Ezekiel's bereavement. It's rather short and it is a parallelism, but it's so profound. So it opens with A, where the word of the Lord comes to him and says, I'm going to take away your wife. Your wife's going to die, but despite that, you're not going to be able to mourn nor weep. And he's commanded to not mourn his dead wife or to go into ritual mourning. And in A prime, we see Ezekiel going to the people of Israel and telling them that when Judah and Jerusalem falls to Babylon, that they are not going to be able to grieve themselves. They're going to be in such a state of shock that they are not going to be able to mourn their city, to mourn Jerusalem. And B, it tells what Ezekiel did. Ezekiel woke up in the morning, he spoke to the people, and that evening his wife died. And he did as he was commanded. And the people said unto him, aren't you going to do these things? What is this that you're doing, basically? And in B prime, verse 24, it says, thus Ezekiel is to you a sign. According to all that he has done, you also shall do, and you will know that I am the Lord your God. So Ezekiel is being set up as the sign for the people of Israel in this moment of tragedy. And then in C, it's highlighted that the delight of their eyes is going to be taken away. Now, this is a phrase that we actually saw in the very beginning. The desire of thine eyes will be taken away with the stroke. And see, the desire of your eyes is going to be taken away, along with your sons and your daughters and everything that you love, and they shall all fall by the sword. And then in C prime, it's repeated. The things that you have set your eyes upon, the things that you love, the things that are so very important to you, they're going to be taken away. You're not going to be able to mourn for them because you're going to be in such a state of shock, but not just shock. You're going to be stuck in the midst of exceeding trauma. That's what's so important here, is the entire book of Ezekiel is a highlight of this coming trauma to the people of Israel. And later in the book, it gets into where God is going in the course of history. But for the majority of the book, it's this trauma. It's Israel being taken away. And when we consider it, when we consider the metaphors that God applies to Israel, we discover that it is the same metaphor. God's wife is being destroyed, so to speak. Israel was his bride, and now they are being destroyed, and he's not going to mourn for them. Why? Not because he didn't love them, but because he's the one being forced to do this in his judgment. Ezekiel is the sign that the people themselves, they're not going to mourn when they lose the things that they hold closest and dear. And it's such a powerful and profound message to Israel. Anyway, I thought you'd enjoy that. When I first discovered it, it was just so profound to me. This intimate, heartfelt story of loss and tragedy in the midst of this grand scope narrative, prophetic narrative, with all the symbolism and imagery that's part of prophecy. And interwoven together, they present the same story. And that very center pericope in the book of Ezekiel is the one that highlights that story for us.